So in this position, if we analyze it, uh, it's white to play. Uh, and the most striking thing in this position is the position of the black king. So you can see that the black king on f8 is, well, it's not in a very good position. It's not castled, so it's blocking in this rook, and it could be easily attacked, or it looks like it can. However, the problem is that white isn't really prepared to attack right now, because white's pieces are also not very developed. So white's two rooks, white's bishop, um, aren't developed, and for black, black's knight and rooks are not developed. So it's a very it's a position where white would want to develop pieces as quickly as possible to avoid losing tempo, going behind in development. Uh, so in this position, white's first move is rook e1. So just taking control of the e file, putting pressure a bit on this bishop. So then black moves bishop f6. And also just bringing out the rook and giving white an option to attack. So then white, after bishop f6, white plays bishop d2. And right now, white's developed the bishop and the rook. However, white doesn't really have many options for attacking black right now, because the only pieces that are capable of, that are even putting pressure on black's king is the queen and rook battery on the e file, and potentially the bishop if it can somehow get to b4. But the black king is defended by the bishop, the knight and the pawn and the rook, and the queen can also go back as well. So in fact, in this position, white's goal is not to attack the black king, but instead, well, if you look around the board, you'll see that black has a weakness in the a7 pawn being isolated, and potentially the c6 and d5 pawn being attacked. So white's plan in this position is actually to attack the queen side. So I guess right now, does anyone have any idea for how white can start to attack the queen side? So just the moves that white should move to start attacking the queen side. In this position, well, if anyone has any moves that they're looking at, they can say it. So in this position, what white wants to do is to play a3, because then after a3, then white can play b4 and controls the c5 and a5 squares, which are the squares that are in front of the c6 and a7 pawns. So that's what white plans on doing right now, or what white wants to do right now. So to support these pawns, white plays bishop d2. So attacking the queen, giving potentially an option for white to play bishop b4 after a3, and also just developing the bishop and connecting the two rooks. So white plays bishop d2, black's queen retreats, also defending the king. So as you can see, white can't really attack the king right now. And then white plays rook ac1, which attacks this pawn on c6, which could potentially become backwards in the future. And also getting out of the way of the f6 bishop, which was looking at this diagonal before. So then black tries to, black develops because black wants to get his pieces out and his king safe, potentially by moving, for example, g7, king g7, then rook e8. And then white plays knight a4, attacking this pawn, attacking the square and making this pawn a backwards pawn, because there aren't any other pawns defending it, and it's on an open file. And also, in the future, white could try to play knight c5, and then the c5 square would be a good square for the knight. So then rook b8, and then a3. So right now, so why can't black play just bishop takes b2 right now? Because knowing that there's two pieces attacking the pawn and only one defender, so why can't black do this? Okay, so after looking at this position, I guess the most forcing move for white after bishop takes b2 would be bishop b4. So threatening to take this knight and attacking black. And then black's only defense is bishop f6, defending the knight. So then what? So after bishop f6, what black is ahead by 2 pawns. However, the king is in a pretty dangerous position right now. So I guess, is there any way for white to continue the attack? Or actually, is there any way for white to attack black right now? Or actually, just what's the best move for white in this position? Just a hint, this bishop is pinning this knight to the king. So how can white exploit this pin? Yeah, so rook c6 is takes this pawn, and the knight's pinned, so it can't take back. And now white has many options right now. Okay, white has many options right now. Or white is threatening many things right now. So for example, white could try to stack the rooks and then controls the c7 file, c7 rank, or the 7th rank. Or white could even sacrifice the rook and then put pressure on this pinned knight. And right now, white can also try to bring in the knight through knight c5. So there's just many things that white can do. And this is all because the black king is placed in a very awkward spot. So black can't play bishop takes b2. So instead, to prevent or to try and prevent any attacks on the king side, black plays h5, which restricts the queen from advancing too far, for example, to g4. And also potentially, if this bishop was gone, then the rook could develop through h6 and g6, or for example, e6, and then the king could become safer in g8. So after f5, h5, white plays queen f3. So why would white play queen queen f3 in this position? Well, the main reason is because of this. Well, one, because it gives the rook, now the rook has control over the e file e. So then it could potentially stack, white could stack rooks and attack the e7 knight, but also because if the queen is on f3, it's putting pressure on the king. So now the queen is on the same file as the king, and there can potentially be pinning maneuvers, pinning tactics in the future. And one more thing is that white is trying to prevent black from playing just g6 and king g7. So now if black can't play g6 because the bishop is undefended. So then black just advances the pawn to h4, and white plays knight c5. First off, white plays knight c5 because c5 is a good square for the knight, so no pawns can attack it, and it's the same square as a backwards pawn. And also because white wants to play bishop b4 in the future and try to just put pressure on the king while also gaining space in the queen side. So right now, you can see that this pawn is undefended. It's completely undefended. So the rook and the bishop can both attack it or capture it. So the first question is, why can't the bishop take on b2? And there's a tactic for white in this position.
Knight e6.
Yeah, so knight e6. Yeah, knight e6. Now the taking advantage of the fact that the knight, the king and the queen are can be forked by the knight, and this pawn is pinned. So black can't do that. So then the same idea will occur if black plays rook takes b2. So how can white take advantage of the fact that if this bishop was gone, then the knight could play knight e6? So the key concept in this tactic is distraction. So I guess how can you distract this bishop from away from c6?
Bishop c3.
So bishop c3. Yeah, bishop c3 attacks both the rook and the bishop. So then, well, black can't take the bishop because then knight e6. And if after the rook leaves to b8, well, then what?
Bishop takes f6.
Yeah, so bishop takes f6, b takes, and queen takes, and even though the pieces are, even though black's actually ahead by pawn, the black king, well, first off, black's pawn structure is very bad, so black has 3 isolated pawns and not really a backwards pawn, but a weak pawn on c6. And also, white's attacking black right now, and the black king isn't in a very safe position right now. And also, so right now, well, white's threatening this knight and also threatening knight e6. So then the king goes to g8, and I believe that's the only move for black to make. Well, and then this knight's lost, so rook takes, and now white's just winning. So taking with the rook is also not an option. So instead, black plays just king g8, hoping that in the future the rook can develop through moving through rook lifting. So after king g8, then white finally plays b4 and attacking, well, putting pressure on this pawn because it's backwards. So then black defends it, and white tries to connect rooks on the c file to attack this backwards pawn. So you can see that happening. And then white plays b5. So right now, again, this seems like black could just take the pawn on b5 for free. So why can't why can't black do that in this position?
Queen h5.
Yeah, so queen h5. Well, and then this rook is the rook on c8 is lost. So then just here, and now white's winning. So then knight e7. White plays queen h5 check to force the king back onto g8 again. And then queen g4. And now white has many options right now. So because of this, this pawn is still pinned because the king is on g8. And white is also threatening to take on c6 because there's only 2 pieces defending it, and white has 3 pieces attacking it. So black's position isn't really good. Black has no option but to let this pawn be lost. So I guess black's best move right now would be king h7. Then after b takes c6, even though both pieces have the same amount of, or both sides have the same amount of pieces, white's advanced pawn is better than black's slightly weaker pawn. So that's that. And now moving on to the next lesson, which is how the rook pawns can be used in a positional manner. So for example, right now, this is a pretty classic, pretty opening type position. So this position is probably part of some opening. So right now, white usually plays queen g4, just normal opening moves like queen g4 or knight f3. However, white could also play h4, which is an interesting move. So what h4 does is that it it gives white space on the king side. So for in the future, white could play g4 or f4 and then attack the king. Or white could also try to advance the h pawn and then weaken black's pawn structure. For example, if let's say black plays just knight c6, then white will play h5, and here black has two options for dealing with this pawn. So black can either play h6, in which then white in the future can try to attack h6, and since black the b file is open, black's only option for castling is to castle kingside. So playing h6 will weaken the king side, but the same thing happens if black ignores white. So if black just plays bishop d7, then white will just advance further. And now, after g6, black doesn't have a dark squared bishop. So now these squares are all very weak, and white can just play, for example, bishop g5 and then f6, and then take advantage of these dark weakened squares. So this seems like a good plan. However, okay, so after h4, however, the disadvantage is that white becomes behind in development. So even though it might not matter in a closed position, if black could, for example, take advantage of the developed squares or the more developed pieces. So I guess if this happens, and here, then let's say white plays just a4 or whatever. One option is for black is to play capture on d4 and then try to attack this pawn and just open up the position and then attacks the king, which is weakened with like king queen a5 or something. So pushing the h4 pawn, the h pawn is advantageous because it breaks black's kingside pawn structure, but it also wastes 2 or 3 tempo on just moving a pawn. So another way that this concept of pushing the pawn can be used can be seen here. So here, after d6, one thing that white can do is to play a4. So just attacking the queen side and then potentially pushing downwards and then gaining control over the queen side. So black has several responses. Black can play a5. Although this does weaken the queenside structure, queenside advance. So black can't really play here anymore because white will play c4. Or black could play just knight d7 and ignores the advancing pawn. And potentially black wants to play b5 and gain isolate this pawn so it can't be defended by the b2 pawn moving to b4. And also just gaining control over the queen side or gaining space. So then knight. So then white and black develop, and then black takes control. White attacks the center, and black defends. So this is a pretty just ordinary game, but the a5 pawn does give white some more space in the queen side. Let's see, after rook e1, this is a playable position for both sides. So black wants to play rook b8 and then push onto push b5. So then one more thing. So that was how pushing the a pawn is a viable move in the opening. And another position is here. So black has just played pushed these 2 pawns, and black wants to play b5 and attacks the center. So then white plays a4, so stopping that. And then black plays a5. So even though black has just played a6, black plays a5. And what this does is that it turns this pawn into a backwards pawn. So now black could play, for example, knight a6 and knight a6 and then knight b4, and get a good square for the knight. And additionally, black also wants to play e5, also attacking this pawn too. And after a5, e5, black can also move the knight to a6 and then attacks the c5 square. So a5, even though it kind of wastes the a6 move, gives black a plan to take control of the queen side. So then queen d2 and e5. And while white wants to try and attack the center, black takes advantage of white's unusual queenside structure. And then just it's a pretty ordinary game from there. So then after that, White's plan is to push the pawn on f4, and potentially attacks the king side, while Black wants to take advantage of the queen side to attack the center through moves like knight a4, or just stacking the rooks. And also putting pressure on the b2 pawn. So this queen is now kind of forced to stay defending this pawn because this queen is attacking it. And I guess another thing in this position is that this pawn is also weakened, or these two pawns are also weak, because if White plays b3, then well, Black has a knight and queen defending this square. So White could also try and attack these two pawns in the future. So I guess the last idea for today would be a4. White plays a4 for many reasons. So, for example, trying to prevent b5, attacking the king on the queen side castled king, and also just opening up the. So I guess, let's say here. Well, I guess this position's fine too. So here, if White plays a4, it could also be White trying to open up the a file by capturing the pawn on b5. So White has plays a4 for many reasons. However, so in this position, this is a Sicilian position, so the c pawn is gone. And White plays a4 because trading pawns will turn the b5 pawn into an isolated pawn, and also it'll weaken the queen side in general because Black has only one pawn on the queen side. So if Black takes, I guess, so if Black takes, then White will take with the knight, then bishop e6, and so right now Black has an isolated pawn that's also on half open rank, so this rook is also attacking it, and this bishop is also putting pressure on this pawn. So I guess in this position, White has a lot of space in the queen side. And of course, if b4, then b4 is another option for Black, whereas then White will play knight d5 and attacks this pawn. And potentially, if Black plays a5, the bishop will be able to play, or the bishop or the knights, for example, if White plays c3, and then after trading, puts the knight on b5, and then attacking this pawn. So White has many plans in this position. Black does too. So Black just wants to develop. So that's one way for a4 to be useful. So another thing that Black can do after taking, so after Black takes on the a4 pawn, White, I guess, takes back, and now White has potential plans to play e4 and then attacks this pawn on e6, d6 I meant. let's go on to here. So after just a moment. After black plays b4, white plays knight a2. And in this position, well, white wants to take advantage of the fact that black has played a4, or white does that because now black can't really defend the a5 pawn. So does anyone see the tactics that white can do after a5? So black can't play a5 because of bishop b5, uh, skewering or pinning the queen to the king. So then after b4, black can't really defend b4 anymore. So black plays just e5, attacking the center, and white still delays capturing the pawn because black still can't play a5, and also e5 stops this knight from developing onto f6. So then knight h6, white takes space on the queen side, and finally takes this pawn and gains a good position. So these pawns are in a very bad arrangement. So that's one way for a4 to be useful, is to force black to play b4. So I guess that'll be the end, and I'll let you move on to your, or actually, it's starting in a couple of minutes. So I guess, so right now, black's, I guess we'll analyze this position then. So black's pawn structure is very weakened right now. So as you can see, this pawn is weakened, the d5 pawn is weak, isolated, and on an open file. So now white could play bishop e3 to attack it with the rook and put pressure on it and force black to defend it. And additionally, these two pawns on the f file are also weakened because now white could potentially play e6 and attack the pawns. And I guess another thing for for white is that white this pawn on e5 is very advanced. So now white has control over the center, and white can exploit it by while attacking this pawn, and also I guess potentially pushing this pawn in the future. So I guess if you want to join this tournament, I can put a link to it. And well, otherwise, I guess that'll be the end of this session.